Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. And yeah, I'm a little fired up about today's show. I get fired up about all the shows, but this week there's a lot going on in the college football realm, but definitely in the Ohio State realm. But with that said, I've got a really timely guest on my show. He's been on my show before. His name is G. Scott Sr. G. Scott Sr., the father of Ohio State tight end G. Scott Jr. And, he's a radio man out in Seattle. He's an auctioneer. I mean, right on down the line. He does a lot of things when it comes to talking, but I really appreciate his insight and his opinions on things. I don't always agree with everything, but he and I found a lot of common ground while he was whiling away the hours here in Columbus, Ohio, after getting to watch his son and the Buckeyes practice on a rainy Monday morning. He was whiling away the hours. And I said, "Hey, you know what? Let's scrap my plans for this week's show and see if I can hook up with one of my favorite guests of all time, G. Scott Sr." He did not disappoint, as would be expected, and we get into a lot of things, including, as he called it, the elephant in the room, his son's headbutt of a Michigan player last year, which is, wow, that was a moment in time for both the player and the team. And just the way his son has bounced back from that, becoming a graduate of the Ohio State University, as he likes to say, and opting to stay at Ohio State for another year instead of possibly transferring. We get into a lot of that. We get into all of that and more is what I should say. And then I have another guest, a segment I recorded way back in July at the Big Ten meetings, Big Ten media soiree preseason for football, and it's with one of my good friends and one of the guys I really respect in this business, maybe more than almost anyone, Pete Thamel of ESPN. Obviously, he's only 45 years old, but boy, has he come up through the ranks and impressed at so-called every level he's been on. And of course, now you know him as the senior college football writer at ESPN. He's also their inside reporter for College Game Day, with Kirk Herbstreit and the gang. He does a podcast, I think, every week with Reese Davis, which is a must listen to. He's definitely a must read throughout the week because he's always coming up with most of the big scoops before anyone else, or basically at the same time. You know how that works. He's extremely well connected. He's connected like a dendrite in your brain, man. Seems to have little arms going everywhere. But Pete Thamel will join me on the Tim May podcast. Excuse me, the Tim May Show. I'm still having trouble with that. Here we are half a year into it, but it is what it is. Some things are hard to get rid of. But, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of Ohio State things before we really get started, before we get into my G. Scott Sr. interview. One of which is the quarterback battle at Ohio State. It's funny, a reporter at the press conference this week, when we got to talk to Ryan Day on this Monday, asked, "Do you really know who it is, but you're just not saying?" And, by that point, Ryan Day had been asked almost every way you can be asked about who the leader is, whether it's Cal McCord, the third-year player who was the backup the last 2 years and has started and won a game for Ohio State way back when he was a true freshman, or Devin Brown, as I call him, the redheaded wannabe starter of the Buckeyes, who has definitely flashed this preseason and did so in the spring. And Ryan Day basically still says it's too close to call, or at least in his brain. And believe me, when it comes to starting quarterback, the only guy's opinion who matters in the end is the head coach, because the head coach always chooses the starting quarterback for any college football team or high school or pro team I've ever been associated with or followed. So, basically that's still up in the air. And I think it's going to remain that way through maybe the end of this week, because there's a couple other big practices coming up. And they obviously had a scrimmage this past weekend during which there was no space, I guess, enough space drawn between the two combatants to where you could say, yes, this is the guy for sure. So the number one offense in the Big Ten for the last several years, one of the elite offenses in the country, fans are going to have to wait to learn who the starting quarterback is going to be for Ohio State. Maybe, who knows, that word may not come until the week of the season opener at September 2nd against Indiana, but it could come as soon as the end of this week. You just got to stay tuned to LettermenRow.com and on3.com to learn the answer. Yeah, you can listen and stay tuned to other places, but I got to tout my spot. And with that said, I'd like to speak on another thing about the Ohio State football team development this week. We learned that Bennett Christian, tight end, second-year tight end, will have to miss the season because he tested positive for a banned substance. Basically, the testing came around the time of the college football playoff last year when the NCAA does one test a year, what they call it in the bowl season. And if there's a silver lining to this, it said Bennett Christian came clean immediately. And even though he's known that he's going to be missing the season for a while, it was finally revealed by head coach Ryan Day what the situation was this week. And Bennett Christian offered a statement online. Some guys run and hide. Bennett Christian did exactly the opposite of that. So, as tough a deal as this is for him to deal with, he's to be lauded for that. And also, he provided a cautionary tale for both his peers and maybe up and coming college football players and high school players. Just not every supplement out there is good for you. But then on top of that, not every supplement out there plays by all the same rules. So it's best to run any supplement you want to put into your body, run it by your training staff or nutrition staff, if in fact you have access to one, to see if in fact all the ingredients comply with NCAA rules in when it comes to college players. So, you feel for him, but life goes on. You've got Cade Stover sitting there at tight end, a returning starter. You've got G. Scott Jr., whose dad I'm about to speak to here on this podcast, and Jelani Thurman, the freshman who enrolled early, but showed extremely well in the spring, and had lost his black stripe way back then, and now he's pretty much making progress through preseason camp. So that. Along with Joe Royer, who's had to miss a lot of camp, I guess, because of a recurring or, a problem injury. They hope to get him back sooner rather than later. But that's pretty much your depth chart at tight end going into the season. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And there's a chance that one of those guys, one of those four might not have been on this list. A chance as in, his dad challenged him at the end of spring. I'm talking about G. Scott Jr., his dad, G. Scott Sr., challenged him at the end of spring. Maybe it is time to move on. Maybe it is time to transfer. Coming off that headbutt incident at Michigan, and things hadn't quite developed like maybe he wanted to from a playing time situation. Maybe it was time to move on and try it at a different place. But G. Scott Jr. was adamant. He was going to stick it out at Ohio State. Along the way, he became a graduate of The Ohio State University. His dad basically as proud of that as he is anything about his son. And the other ways, his son has matured and evolved and become a man while at Ohio State. So without further ado, let's get a new conversation I had with G. Scott Sr. Man, I'm so excited to welcome in this guest, G. Scott Sr. It's been a while since you've been on the Tim May Show. Way back then, it was the Tim May Podcast. But man, I saw you whiling away the hours in sleepy downtown Columbus today on a rainy, steamy kind of day. And I figured, hey, let's hook up, right?
Yeah, man. First of all, it's good to talk to you, Brother Tim. Always a pleasure. You and I follow each other on social media. Grateful for you and all your work that you do. And I think you just caught me. Yes, I'm down here, right here in Short North, right here in Columbus. I love to stay downtown here is where I do. But as you know, right now, fall camp is happening for the Buckeyes, right? Yeah. And, there's parents that are in town, but he's got work to do, right? So we were able to get over there for the open practice. And then after the open practice, I was able to go to lunch with my son, and we all went to lunch. And then after that, he had to get back to it. So I just find myself just in my hotel room looking at I got a good view, looking at the traffic. And so, as you can see, sometimes I get on Twitter and I just release my thoughts sometimes, man. It really, some people journal, which that's good.
Yeah.
I journal and I take to Twitter. And I think that you saw some of my thoughts on Twitter, and whatever questions you have to ask and you feel like people want to hear what my boring self has to say, then let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can tell right away, this man's a radio host back in Seattle. He's also an auctioneer. He's also does public speaking. It's hard for me to believe G. Scott Sr., but you do. And he happens to have a son by the name of G. Scott Jr., who is a tight end on the Ohio State Buckeyes, came here as a highly touted wide receiver, made the switch. We all went through stories and even a podcast about that a couple of years ago about how, hey, he may be filling a niche that's opening ever more widely in the National Football League of these slot guys that can just tear you up. We'll get into that in a moment, G. Scott Sr. But I wanted to ask you this, just your impressions overall of this 2023 Ohio State football team that you've gotten to eyeball. Well, what's your impressions overall?
Well, first, when I give you my impressions, I want everybody listening to understand where they're coming from, right? I don't have the hours of watching practice. It's not open to everyone. So my interpretation of what's going on with this team is through my son, through some of his friends, and the 1 hour and a half or so of practice, open practice that I got to see, and also being at the family event. So here's the feel. And like, Tim, if you don't mind, let's get deeper into what someone else might say.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. In all the practices that I've ever been to, there is a sense, you can feel it, right? And I only have a small sample size. There is a sense of we're really here for business type deal. I felt even an energy through Coach Ryan Day today that seemed to be, I'm not saying that, of course, he's intense and he's a head coach, but I felt like a little bit more of an intensity out of him at practice. I shared this on Twitter. That practice that I saw with the Buckeyes today was more intensity and anxiety than there is at a pro football practice. And as you know, I'm at pro football practices quite often, as you know, my affiliation with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes.
This isn't saying that pro football doesn't practice hard. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to give a window into an understanding of what some of these top programs and how they practice. Also, my takeaway of today's practice is, Tim, man, there's a lot of players. And when I say a lot, I'm going to go ahead and tell you over 35, 40 players that can play in the National Football League right now.
Wow.
Right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they are really good. So what are they working on? So that's what someone might say, well, gee, what are they working on? Well, if there's something that I've learned specifically about the Buckeyes in Ohio State and what I still believe they have to work on here. They have to work on here. When you first become a Buckeye, no matter where you were, you're talented. And if you're listening to this podcast and if you're a recruit or if you're a family, your son or daughter is really good. I guarantee you, they're probably the top of the top of the top. They're really good. But you're going to come here to the Buckeyes and you're going to be on a field with a whole lot of folks that are top of the top of the top. And so it's almost like the same water that softens the potato hardens the egg. And it's that energy and intensity of Buckeye boiling water that you got to really, really get into. So the takeaway is, man, is there are a lot of good players out there, really good. If you want to ask me what players I saw, go ahead, do it. But really good out there. And man, they're big, they're strong, they're fast. And one last takeaway, man, they did 12 periods out there. They were telling me sometimes they're doing 19.
Yes.
Hey, brother Tim, hey, that's tough sledding, bro. That's hard work. So they're out there working hard. And then as they came off the field, it was really cool, man. It's like, oh, all this alpha male testosterone, rah, rah. And as they come off the field to see their parents, man, they soften like that potato, like I was talking about, that boiling water, man. So there's a lot of good stuff going on over there with the Buckeyes.
Dude, like you just said, don't name everybody, because you can, like you said, you could name 40 guys. Give me, besides G. Scott Jr., number 88, give me some guys that clearly catch your eye, that are in that realm of what you're talking about next level talent, maybe even right now. Who just jumps off the field at you? And I know you're probably going to say Marvin Harrison Jr. I would think that'd be one guy, but who else jumps out at you?
Well,
a lot of juniors on this team, a lot of juniors.
No. Yeah, there are some juniors. I just wanted to say this because, when you start naming names and things like that, you can kind of, this person and that person, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you're not the head coach. You don't have to worry about hurting anybody's feelings. Go ahead.
You're right. Yeah, you're right about that. Okay, how about this? I'll just be fair. I'll say, and I'll just do one name. Is that fair? I'll do one name. There's a whole bunch of players out there. I mean, really good. And what was really cool, and what I love about what Coach Day is doing, I don't know if any other places are doing this, but it's really cool how they do and split the two fields, right?
Yeah.
So when they got the two fields going, they have an opportunity for ones and twos and everybody to be mixed up. So you're not just ones on the field, and then twos on the field, and then threes on the field. And then by the time you get all that and back to one, right? The ones have been sitting there for so long. But this way, you got reps after reps after reps, one. And then two, you have those that aren't a number one and are lower on the depth chart. They're over there getting more reps in front of other ones. So that part right there really makes that intensity. It just goes fantastic. But I'll say the number one eye popper thing for me, and I'll tell you what happened. What happened was they were doing drills. I was walking in. It was JT's dad and I. We were walking in. We were just kind of walking in, strolling. We're talking, sipping our coffees, and we go over there, and we're over by the D line, right? And they were over there, Coach Larry Johnson doing his thing, putting them through drills. And Tim, brother, I was sitting there just sipping my coffee, and I saw this number 97.
Yeah.
And he went, listen, bro, he just went through a drill, just real quick. And it was just the way that he did it. And when you get there, they give you a roster, right? With a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
And so I just sipped my coffee. I said, whoa, grab my paper. Went to so see who it was. They said it was this dude, Kenyatta Jackson Jr. Is that right?
Yes.
Hey, man. That dude right there, just that, it was the moment, right?
Yes.
It was the setting, it was the moment, it was the drill, and then it was how big he was, and it was just like, man, if I was a scout, if I was just somebody just coming in, I'm not saying that, he's going to be Hall of Famer. You're just asking me a name that just popped right off. I would grab my piece of paper, grab a highlighter, and just highlight number 97. Again, I'm giving you this. It's only because I just saw that moment and it just popped. Now, I ain't saying no more names. I just wanted to say that young man.
Yeah. But G, and this is G. Scott Sr., ladies and gentlemen, father of G. Scott Jr., tight end at Ohio State. That is what jumps out about this football team is that guy's a backup. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you got Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, whose dad you walked in with, or basically listed as starters at defensive end. Well, listed, but they're going to play a lot of guys, right? And like you pointed out in your tweet, and you're pointing out now, they've got a lot of quality guys to play. That is the overriding, I guess, impression you get watching a practice, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, Tim, and I'm talking about this goes for all positions. I looked at the offensive line. I saw a bunch of those guys doing well. I mean, I don't need to talk about zone 6 anymore. I mean, I think the world talks about the wide receivers enough. Shout out to zone 6, the wide receivers, the best wide receivers in the world on the planet. But I think it's fair. I don't need to talk about those guys enough. They look great.
Yeah.
But and then you go into the DBs, the secondaries, the linebackers, and how great they look and everything like that. There's just the depth, right? In what is happening. It's just credible. And one last thing, I just want to just say, like, a lot of times, man, when you start talking about the top teams in the country, or the top quarterbacks, or top this and top that, we got people to understand, like, this is all at an extremely high level. First of all, there's nobody terrible out there. So get that. When people tell you, oh, that guy's awful, be careful of that person. All of the players out there are really good. Mm-hmm. What separates great and just okay is about that much.
Yeah.
It's only a little. And that's what Ohio State and I think big programs are trying to, when this comes into play, that is the difference between great and just okay. So Tim, man, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Buckeye parent, there's really a lot of talent out there. And it was helped me because, again, last week I'm at Seahawks, I'm watching them, and then I come out here and I'm like, wow. A lot of these guys can play right now.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Jackson Smith-Njigba, obviously you tweeted about him. He's caught your eye. You just think about what he could have meant to that team a year ago, right, at Ohio State. And has he rolled into the NFL about as seamlessly as anybody you've seen in recent years? What's your take on him?
Tim, if Lord willing, if he remains healthy, he will be the offensive rookie of the year.
Wow.
I mean, it's not even like there's nobody even close. Well, that's disrespectful to all the guys that do work hard. My opinion is I really do think that, Lord willing, he stays healthy. He is the offensive rookie of the year. He's just coming to this game and he's playing well. And, shout out to, you got to give credit to the wide receiver group, to the wide receiver coach and Brian Hartline.
Yeah.
I'll say this to you because I actually told it to Brian Hartline today to his face. I told him this. I said, Hart, you don't have the best delivery when it comes to things sometimes because you don't know how to just sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
Some people know how to sandwich it and dance around, but Hartline, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He just gives it to you like it is. And I actually think that on one hand, when someone says, "Oh, man, that Hartline really told it straight like it was," and we say in life we want it straight, but do we? Because sometimes if they ask you if they look fat in these jeans and you tell them yes, is that really what they want to hear?
Yeah.
Well, in the case of Hartline, man, he got them boys. They know they come prepared in that league for sure.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about a guy that you know fairly well. You helped raise him. His name is G. Scott Jr. Like I said, we talked about him a couple of years ago and making this switch to tight end. As Ryan Day, in a response to a question I was asking about the tight end room now, with, of course, Bennett Christian having to miss the year because of that failed drug test or I guess positive drug test, or however you define a drug test. He's got to miss the year. Joe Royer has been banged up. Obviously, you've got that freshman Jelani Thurman in. No doubt Cade Stover is going to be the starter based on the way things ended last year and his leadership and stuff. But as he said, G. Scott Jr. is the best version of himself that they've seen so far at Ohio State. And that means the move to tight end and that whole, evolution he's had to go through and stuff. What do you see from your son? What do you see out of him? Could this be that year?
Well, when you say, and by the way, I'm just going to answer your question. And your question is could it be that year?
Yeah.
And first of all, don't take my answer wrong. I just want to explain it. 2023 is already his year. He's on one of the top 5, arguably top 5 best teams in the country. Yeah. That's one. How many people are able to say that they are on a team like that? That's number one. Number two, he just graduated from the Ohio State University a few weeks ago. Number three, mentally, he's doing better than I've ever seen him do. So when we talk about the evolution of G. Scott Jr. and the player that he is, there's a lot that goes into becoming that player, because before you become the player, you got to become the man.
Yeah.
And I think what happened with G. Scott Jr. is that he has become a better man. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room right now, because I know that there are a lot of people that still talk about it. That headbutt that he did, yeah, was the worst thing to ever happen to him. Let me repeat that again. It was the worst thing that ever happened to him, because it was the worst, because it was a real bad moment. It was a bad moment. It was the lack of sportsmanship. It was everything that you can talk about, right? Yes. It's probably something that's going to be talked about and seen for years to come. His Twitter, his social media, the nastiness, the awfulness that was said to and about him was ridiculous. There was people back home in the state of Washington that said all those nasty things. You ever heard the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing about the headbutt. It was awful. It was everything that everybody has said about it. Now, what do? If you're a parent, if you're a loved one, if you're a coach, the first thing you tell someone going forward is, hey, why don't you learn from it? And so my son, he had a choice. And I'll share something with you, and I'll be very transparent about something. In the spring of this year, springtime, he asked me if I thought that he should transfer. And I said, yes. I said, yeah, you should transfer. Because what I said is that I said, transfer because I don't see your situation getting better than what it is.
Interesting.
And of course, that was, and that was it. That was a conversation. And it was after the spring game. And as a matter of fact, to be exact, I told him that I thought he should transfer right before the spring game.
Wow.
Okay?
Yes.
After the spring game, it was like a week or so, I hit him up and I said, so, hey, man, what's the plan? What are you going to do? He says, I'm not going anywhere. He said, the reason I'm where I'm at is because of me and nobody else, right?
Yeah.
And all the time, we're always searching for, I want more playing time. And then once you get more playing time, I want more receptions. And then once you get more receptions, I want more touchdowns. And then when you get more touchdowns, you're mad that you didn't get the most touchdowns in the country. And then when you get that, we just saw Johnny Manziel was the Heisman Trophy winner, was a first-round draft pick. He had the celebrity status and had everything in the world. And still, that wasn't enough, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, in the case of my son, he got to the point where he says, you know what? In a city, he told me this story. He says, this is a dragon in the city type story. And Tim, not to bore you, but the dragon in the city type story is this. If you are held up in a building and in the city, there's this dragon going around, you have three choices. You can A, sit there and hide. B, leave the city because you're scared of the dragon, or go out there and face the dragon.
Yeah.
And so his decision is to face the dragon. And some would say that's the hardest thing to do, because in life, facing the dragon, facing what it is that we're having adversity with, that's the hardest thing. So it was my son's decision who said, I'm not going anywhere. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to quit putting my hopes on playing time, my hopes on catches, my hopes on people liking me, my hopes on all of these superficial things, and I'm just going to become a better person. If you become a better person and enjoy and appreciate every single day that you have here on earth, everything else takes its place.
Yeah.
So the initial question is he hoping for a better year? Am I hoping for a better year? He's already had it. Yeah. He's already on that team. He's already won, right? And when he already won, and I want to just say this, I can't just put this on my son in his growing up, because we parents that are a part of this journey and process, I had to grow up too. I was looking like, I want the touchdowns. I want all the greatness. I want to see Tim May say all these great things about my son. I want to, maybe that's not drugs. And I don't mean this disrespectful to drug addiction, because I do think drug addiction is a real thing. Okay, yeah. So I want to say that. However, there's dopamine hits that comes from social media and what people say about your son, right? Yes. So we look to social media and we see what Tim May has to say. Or if Tim May says, oh, G. Scott Jr. isn't very good, or G. Scott Jr. is a bust. Not that you said that, but when they say that, then I get low because of what someone else said. And in the Johnny Manziel doc, we all found out that Johnny Manziel's family never came from oil money, but yet everybody in the world thought so. So we can read social media and things aren't even true, but yet it's being said. So I want to go back to the very beginning. The reason why he's doing well every day is because his mental and his why and what he's doing has been something that he's understood. He's not putting all of the glory on, I got to look forward to the Indiana game, and I hope Coach Ryan Day and Coach Key plays me a lot of time. What if they don't? What if Ryan Day doesn't play him? What if he only gets 2 snaps? Yeah, there will be people that laugh at him on social media. Okay, you good? Still got a Buckeye degree. Yeah. You're still winning. So I think I had to grow up, and I'm so proud of him, because the best thing that he's done all season and all year has been he decided not to transfer. He graduated as a Buckeye, and he continues to appreciate where he is right now, and he's learned from the past.
GTE. No, I'm just joking. Gee, that was something there, that little soliloquy, man. And you're exactly right. I mean, for some guys, it comes sooner than others, and obviously your son made the move from wide receiver to tight end in a little bit of a situation where it was necessary from a standpoint of a point of need for the football team and stuff. And I think most people would like to see that pay off for him in the long run. And like you just said, you did address the elephant in the room, the headbutt. But usually you don't headbutt somebody without being provoked. But you know what? Can't afford to do that, right? I mean, that's the lesson learned there. But the way your son has grown off the field in social media and other ways, I think is obvious to everybody. And this is a loaded question from the standpoint of, I know what the answer is. How proud of you are your son? Are you of your son right now? Football to the side, like you said, he's graduated, lost his mother, bounced back from that. How proud of you are you of your son?
Very. I'm super excited. I'm so proud. Like more proud than I'd be if he was scoring touchdowns. More proud than I'd be if he was, because I'm proud of how he attacks every single day. I'm proud of the way sees life in the way he talks to me. For all the parents out there, moms, dad, this isn't just a football thing. This is a parent thing. And there, as a mom or a dad, you ever get to that point when you're talking to your son or daughter, and when they're talking to you, you're just like, wow, they're really growing up.
Yes.
And that's that part right there. Super excited about. He's really, his faith, his walk with the Lord has been exceptional. It's making me realize that I need to work on my spiritual walk, but it's something that he's been doing. He's been really into his Bible, but I'm just proud that he's getting it. But there is no destination, right?
Yeah.
Like we also, I'm proud that he understands that the destination is actually the journey, right? So the journey, and I've said this before, it's not the ribbon, but it's the race, right? And so I'm proud that he understands that.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, speaking of journeys, man, I hate to segue from that. I would like to just say, okay, thanks for talking with me, G. Scott Sr.
Come on, man. I'm in a hotel room.
I know, good. But I mean, that was a good finish, but let's get to another finish real quick. Okay. Speaking of the journey, you live in Seattle area. Washington and Oregon are going to be part of the Big Ten in 2024, along with USC and UCLA.
Yeah.
Is it mind-boggling? Is it crazy to you to think that this team from right down the street, for you, figuratively speaking, in Seattle is going to be a part of the Big Ten, is going to be making these journeys a hell of a lot more than Big Ten teams are going to be making the journey out to Seattle? I mean, have you wrapped your head around that yet?
Yeah, because Tim, it's very easy to understand why this is going to happen, and where it's come from. First, let me go ahead and address the elephant in the room. College football generates a lot of money. I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but let me repeat: a lot of money. So when money is involved, watch that. When money is involved, well, the things that people used to say about tradition and all those things kind of takes a back seat. So Tim, what I'm saying is money is more important than tradition. Now, I think that is great that the University of Washington and the University of Oregon is part of the Big Ten. I think I live in the state of Washington, and the state of Washington is filled with dogs, the Huskies, and are also filled with Cougs.
Yeah. And
my heart breaks for the Cougs. My heart breaks for Washington State, because I wish that they were part of a conference. The Pac-12 used to be called the Conference of Champions, man. There was a point in time that the world was watching the Pac-12. And the fact that this has happened to it is heartbreaking. And, we had this thing over there called the Apple Cup, Brother Tim, where Washington plays against Washington State. So the future of that is for sure in limbo, right? You're going to take that. That's possibly going to be gone. And yeah, I mean, this is good for Washington. And look, if you're a football fan, it's great. But the local part of it, right? When you start having the potential of losing local interests, right? Yeah, UW fans, they're going to be fine, right? But again, the state of Washington has Coug fans too. So it always helps when everybody is talking about football. What will the Coug fans talk about? So while Washington and Oregon is going to be coming over, I'm looking forward to the world that I think is going to exist, Tim. I think is going to exist where one day we have two power conferences, right?
Yeah.
And then they run it like the Premier Champions League over in Europe, where if you're not playing well enough, you're relegated down. And if you're playing well enough down here, you're relegated up. So I just think the future is something, but I hopefully look forward to a day that Washington State and Oregon State, I wish they could find a big conference, man.
What do you mean I'm relegated? I'm going to start my own conference. I mean, that'll create the, and I see exactly where you're coming from. I'm talking to other people about that. That's just going to create craziness, too. But I think that's 20 years down the road. What do you think, G? I want I wanted to ask you this though, from a parent standpoint, when you see, and you've seen what some people have said about it, and you know how much, this is done for money. The college football playoff is about to go to 12 teams and heap a lot more cash onto that fire, that money fire. Yes, players get to benefit from the NIL, name, image, and likeness now, but that's because of state laws, not because of anything the NCAA did. They've benefited, though, from some other things that basically cover the cost of going to college more fully, et cetera. But should college football players, you've got a son who is one, should they now become employees, or what do you want to call it, paid employees of their universities, based on the fact that so much money is now coming into college athletics and is mainly coming through the major college football pipeline? You're a parent. What is your take on that?
Well, I want to say this because the Tim May show will always be shown for 50 and 100 and 150 years from now, right? And somebody's going to see that. Somebody's going to see this clip, and they're going to want to know where G. Scott Sr., what was his opinion on this very topic back then? Let me be very crystal clear for those listening 150 years from now. Yes, players need money. Yes, and here's why. You can't have a business model that generates $1 billion between a conference and a television station, and you still have it to where there are players that get free room and board and some snacks. I mean, Tim, come on, man. Like, we're talking $1 billion. Wait, that's $1 billion today.
Yeah.
What's it going to be in 10 years if you keep this model up? So again, it goes back to, man, but by the way, shout out to Johnny Manziel for even doing the doc. I appreciate him for telling that truth. But if you haven't seen that doc, there are so many lessons in that. Yes. And I think the major lesson in that is this. There's never enough, Tim. There's never enough money. There's people right now, once you make $100,000 a year, you want 200. And once you make 200, you make 400. Most of us don't get to a place where we're like, you know what? That's enough money. No. And when it comes to college football and the money that it's generating, there's never enough. We're talking about conference football where teams, I'm not talking football, football's be fine, but you're talking about basketball and softball and tennis going from Washington and traveling across country to play. Why is that happening? Yeah. Is that because it's what's good for the students? No, it's what's good for money, period. Yeah. So I don't know what the business model would be. Do you put the money in a trust? So when some of these college players, when they're 25 years old, they get access to that money and, and all those things? I don't know. But I do know this, that this model that is currently happening and the continuation of increase in TV money and coaches' money and school money, while the money for, let's say, the 98% of college players stays the same, when's enough? Yeah. At what number? And for anyone, and by the way, I love when people disagree with me on this topic. That's fine. It's a beautiful world to agree to disagree. Yes. But Tim, I'll throw this back at you, and I'm not supposed to be asking you questions.
Go ahead.
At what point is it okay? Now it's time for them to get money. Is it a $2 billion contract between conference and TV? Is it $5 billion? Is it $10 billion? Yeah. When's enough?
Yeah. Well, that's what I've thrown back at people when they ask me about that very same thing too, is that, used to be, for example, teams would get a little bowl bonus, for playing in a bowl game way back in the 70s and 80s. You'd make a certain amount of money, and that would just kind of went into a rainy day fund for everybody. They had figured out a way to pay for athletics before all the TV money started really just escalating. And but everything escalated in terms of college athletics and major college athletics. Everything escalated in terms of facilities, uniforms, run them down the line, coaches' salaries, administrator salaries, support people's salaries, but not as much as maybe support people's salaries should have. But still, the money kept going up, except for what the players, the student athletes, as they call them, were sharing, which was, like you said, there are other avenues for revenue or money for athletes now that didn't exist back then, like the Austin grant and right on down the line. But it pales in comparison to the way everybody else's salaries, et cetera, escalated because of the money coming in, primarily because of football and a little bit because of basketball contracts, television contracts. And nobody's going to tune in and watch Ryan Day going. Well, I would tune in once to watch Ryan Day go head to head with Jim Harbaugh. that would be a Elon Musk versus Zuckerberg. I mean, that would be something you'd tune in to see once, right? But the bottom line is the money. As the money has escalated and salaries have escalated on that realm, it didn't for the student athlete. And like I said, NIL is a law now. Is law. That's the only reason you're allowed to get name, image, and likeness money. But you still have to semi-generate that yourself, even though there are schools that are using it as inducements and stuff. The bottom line is that's not because of any NCAA mandates. And the word here, G. Scott Sr., the word nobody wants to get to, and I understand it because it does open or close a Pandora's box. I'm not sure what it does. Maybe closes one, opens another. The word is contracts. Just like in the NFL, once you've signed a contract with someone, now they have control over what you can do, how much money you make, et cetera. But they are paying you a fair share of their revenue. And no one wants to go there. They don't want to make student athletes employees. I sort of understand it and I sort of don't. What's your take?
I sort of understand it and I sort of don't. And I also understand when you see people say things like, this is going to change the game. And,
Yeah.
the other day I was actually talking on my show about this. And I was talking about how when we think about college football, right? Give me your first memory of college football. It's either I was watching with my dad, or I was watching with my mom, or my uncle, or my family, or me and my friends, or Keith Jackson. And you know what I mean? Like we all have our fond memories of, well, my grandfather went to the Ohio State, or my great-great-great-grandfather went there, and I've been a Buckeye for 60 years. Whatever tradition that you want to talk about it. Yeah. But what has happened is money today is more important than tradition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so for anyone that says, I don't like these changes because it's going to change everything, to which I say, you're not wrong. But the decision to make more money on this with the model of student athlete, that was made years ago. Yes. So this isn't new. The only thing that is new, it is harder to hide now. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
This has been going on for years. It's just harder to hide. And now Pandora's box is open and none of us can get the toothpaste back in the tube. Yeah. It's a Reynolds wrap. Now, what it's going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But I do know one thing. I do know how we watch TV is different. I do know that all of my kids and their friends and everything, I know they don't even watch cable TV, right? Yeah. I know that you're having to get ESPN Plus and this streaming service and YouTube and all
Peacock.
This stuff. Peacock. So remember, everything is changing, not now, but right now. Let's not even talk about AI. You don't even want to get into that. So where the future is going, I don't know, but there's one remaining underlying fact. There's never enough money.
Yeah. Last thing, I got Pete Thamel, well-known ESPN reporter. He's the inside reporter for Game Day, ESPN Game Day, College Game Day, etc. I got a little recording with him coming up after we're done here. And he made a great point, when I was talking to him. He leads off with it. College football has never been a better product on the field and more, I don't know if the word you want to use is chaotic or whatever you want to call it, off the field from the standpoint of what's going on, around the facility, et cetera. I would think, you being a football fan, you probably agree with that, right? I mean, the product, the offense that Ohio State puts on the field is unprecedented in the realm, in the long story tradition of Ohio State. The last 10 years have been crazy from an offensive standpoint. I would think you agree with that, right?
I told you at the beginning of the show, brother.
Yeah.
I said at the very beginning, I said, there are a lot of players that can play right now. Like, that what I saw with the Buckeyes today in practice, and I'm not just saying this. I'm quite sure you can go to Georgia. I'm quite sure you can go to Alabama. Yep. I'm quite sure that you can go to these top programs and maybe see the same thing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, Tim, this is incredible. You've been covering college football, I think, for 40 plus years. All right?
Yeah. You
mean to tell me 40 years ago they were playing football like this?
No.
What? They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. I'm not calling them better football players because I don't want to be disrespectful to the past, okay? That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to say that right now, what I see, when I was in high school, when I was in college, I'm just saying, we were not as good as them today. There's 7-on-7, the sports science, the Mickey Moriartys of the world. My goodness, they're specimens over there. And they don't just start football from fall and then go through November and then the playoffs and bowl games. This is year round.
Yeah.
They literally work all the time. They don't get 5 weeks off.
Yeah.
They don't get that. They're constantly having to go. So, yeah, I'd say that Pete's right. I think the college football product is incredible. And here's how I know that Pete's right. Here's how I know that we're telling the truth. Because viewership is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
What we are seeing, Tim, back when I was coming up in the 80s, just so you know, my dad and his friends, I used to watch, when I was a little kid and I would watch them. You know what they were watching? They were talking about
what?
Boxing.
Yeah.
Boxing was huge. It was bigger than college football. It was bigger than pro football. Who the heavyweight champion of the world and middleweight champion, Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns. Dude, boxing was a big deal. I'm not saying boxing isn't real now, but if you're listening right now and I ask you who the heavyweight champion of the world is, I tell you that you probably know who the best quarterback is in pro football, then you know who the heavyweight champion of the world is. That's where we're at with watching and viewership.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing, G. Scott.
What do you got?
G. Scott Sr. You touched a little nerve there earlier when you were talking about growing up and the first game you got to watch, with your dad and brothers or, family and stuff. And I just remember, I'm 69. My dad took me and my older brother, Ben, to Alabama home games. That's where I grew up and then moved to Texas at 65. But early 60s Alabama home games. And my hero, of course, was Joe Namath, Joe Willie Namath. Bear Bryant was the head coach then. Everybody's heard of him. But Joe Namath was from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. And he was playing for Alabama. You understand what I'm saying? Meaning Bear Bryant basically went to Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania to sign Joe Namath because Joe Namath could help him win football games and further the cause of Alabama football. My point is, it's for a long time now, it's been a go get the best players you can get from wherever they are and bring them to your place and let yours take on theirs and see who's best. But the point is, it's been a player's game forever, but it's been a star player's game for a very long time also, meaning they are worth something to you other than room, board, and books, correct?
I mean, I don't have the data in front of me.
I did a podcast on this about 5 years ago with a guy that did, and it was very interesting. But go ahead.
I don't have the data in front of me, but if I was a betting man, I wonder where you could tie football success of a university to enrollment.
Yeah.
And I haven't checked lately, but back in my day, a lot of people like to say that. Back in my day, tuition for a semester for tuition was about $5,000 a semester, $10,000 a year. You mean to tell me today we got $50,000 a year for college? Yeah. I'm not saying that's get your money. But when you have that going on, and then you have a success to the football program, you know what? I'll just stop there.
Hey, as I said a long time ago, Alabama wanted to increase its enrollment real quick before we finish. I think they're around in the high 20s at one point, and I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they said they would like to get it, moving on up toward 40,000 at the University of Alabama, which if you've ever been to Tuscaloosa, I grew up in Texas, Alabama, and in Texas, and in Texas they had oil wells, you know what I mean, that pumped the money. But that every 1,000 students you add to an enrollment, man, that enhances that enhances the wherewithal of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in all kinds of ways, and definitely the university. That's just an example. So yeah, you're exactly right. One brings on the other. Hey, G. Scott Sr., man, appreciate you joining me. I'm glad we got it raining on this day when we're recording this, so you feel more like home back in Seattle. It's crazy. Yeah. The weather's crazy now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think I'm just gonna go, and I might find me another restaurant to go and hang out here on High Street and get ready to fly back to Seattle tomorrow.
Before you hang up,
yeah,
who's the best quarterback you saw on the field when you got to watch open practice?
You know what? Great question. Both of them. No. Okay, wait. Before I go, I want to really answer that honestly. Earlier in the show, I said this even before this question. Yeah. I said the difference between great and just okay at this level, elite football, is that much. Okay. When I saw those quarterbacks out there, both of them, they're really good, Tim.
Yeah.
They're really good. And if they weren't really good, I don't think that they would be Buckeyes. And you want to know who else is really good?
Who?
Ryan Day and his track record for quarterbacks.
Wow.
I don't know if many people remember this or not. And this is probably the best way for everyone to really settle in on whoever becomes the starting quarterback. Justin Fields was not the starter at Georgia.
Right.
And he did not win the job. He left and he came here. But for some reason, he came here and was really good, right?
Yeah.
So that should tell everyone everything that they need to know about the quarterback and Ryan Day and what's going to happen going forward. And I'm just telling you that I don't think that it's possible for someone like me, who's never been a quarterback in my life, to judge two quarterbacks, right, that are really good and say, I think that this quarterback is better than the other. It's not possible. It's not possible for me to see these quarterbacks and see them doing that. They're really, really good. So there's my answer on that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, someone does not define who the number one quarterback is at Ohio State. G. Scott Sr. I didn't expect you to, but I thought I'd give it a shot. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Tim.
Yeah. G. Scott Sr., well, I thank you once again for joining the Tim May Show. It's always a blast, as you well know.
All right, brother. You take care, my man.
GameTime.co and the GameTime app have turned into the place to go if you want to find those hard to get, those last minute tickets to any concert, comedy show, or more importantly, from this point of view, sporting events, most especially Ohio State football. The Game Time app, it's easy to download. If you use the Game Time app, the first purchase, if you enter the promo code Buckeyes, the promo code Buckeyes, you'll get $20 off your first purchase for using the Game Time app. And of course, the Game Time app and the GameTime.co, they also come with the guarantee that if you find a ticket somewhere else in the same row for a lesser price to any event, then you will get 110% of the difference between that price and the price you paid on GameTime.co or on the Game Time app. And that makes it worthwhile right there. So Game Time, the Game Time app is turned into the place to go. And of course, when you do download the Game Time app and you do put in Buckeyes and you do get that $20 off that first ticket, of course, terms apply, just like terms apply on the Game Time guarantee of 110% back on a similar ticket for a lesser price. The difference between that ticket price and the price you paid. So Game Time, the Game Time app has become the place to go for a lot of reasons. That's why it's the fastest growing ticket brokerage in the country. Yeah, you got the idea why I had G. Scott Sr. on, man. He not only brings the knowledge, he not only brings the opinions, he brings the energy. And you can see why he is a success on the air as an auctioneer. I think anything you'd put him behind a microphone on, he'd be a success at out there in the Seattle area and then basically anywhere else. So G. Scott Sr., thank you once again for joining the Tim May Show. And now let's move into my little segment with Pete Thamel, guy I've known for a long time, as I said. He's about as well-respected as you get when it comes to reporters covering the national scene of major college football, major college sports. And I ran into him at the Big Ten meetings this year back in July. And, most of this is not dated at all because I get into him about college football. As you heard me talk with G. Scott Sr. about college football, the product has never been better on the field, more exciting on the field, and maybe as chaotic or whatever the word is you want to use off the field. We get into that. We get into Ryan Day and how he should be revered by Ohio State fans and others, and Ohio State, Ohio State football, where it kind of stands at this moment. And obviously, it stands high going into this preseason where it's ranked, number 3 in the latest poll, the Associated Press preseason poll. But without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Pete Thamel. Hey, Pete Thamel, welcome to the Tim May Show.
Tim May, it's great to be on your show. I hope I hope this internship at Big Ten Media Day leads to a full-time job covering the Buckeyes. I got faith in you, Tim.
Thank you very much. I've been trying to get that gig since 1984, but I digress. In a nutshell, can you define for people what kind of era we are in college football? You've been covering this for a long time for a lot of organizations, now with ESPN and Game Day. I mean, it's just crazy.
We're in a golden era on the field and a muddled era often.
Yeah.
And no matter what the suits do, be they in Indianapolis or in conference offices, they can't mess up the sport, Tim. The sport is unbelievable. It's the best on-field product in the entire time that I've done this. I'm not a Pollyannish. If it was bad, like the NBA in the 90s when it all bogged down, I would tell you it's bad. But the on-field product of college football with the diversity of play and the geographic variance to different title contenders. Now, look, it is a little top-heavy, but at the end of the day, every Saturday, the product, I think, is as strong as it's ever been.
Specifically Ohio State, because this is a kind of an Ohio State-centric podcast.
That's the team you want to cover, right?
Show, yes, exactly. I'm aspiring to that.
Someday.
Can you give people an idea of the job Ryan Day has done? I know that's a sort of a obtuse kind of question, but...
So Ryan Day's won 90% of his games. So I would generally say that's pretty good. I think if you track historically coaches, so he just finished his 4th season.
Yes,
is that right?
Going into his 5th.
If you track 4 seasons win percentage the last generation, I would imagine he's in the top 5. I haven't done that yet, but I would think that. I think he has lost 3 regular season games.
Yeah.
Is that right? So I would just think, generally, if there are critics of Ryan Day, you have to ask yourself a question of, who could actually come in and improve upon historically good performance.
Yeah.
And that's what it's been. And it's also been good football, too. Like, it's fun to watch the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes have talent. The Buckeyes have first-round picks at quarterback. The Buckeyes have the best receiving core over a 5-year span that I've probably covered in my career. Like, the Buckeyes are in good hands.
Yeah, and you've known Ryan for a while, and I wanted to ask you this. I mean, you heard me, I've asked him this a couple of times, but even at Big Ten Media Days, they kind of let it all hang out against Georgia finally. I'm talking about from an offensive standpoint. The quarterback just balled out, as the old saying goes, with C.J. Stroud and stuff, and you get the idea that that's the way Ryan wants to play now. I mean,
yeah, I don't think there's any doubt how Ryan Day wants to play.
Yeah.
I got an article coming out in the next month on Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
And Marvin Harrison Sr. made a great point to me. He said, Ryan Day's greedy. He's a greedy coordinator. So Marvin Harrison, as the father of a receiver, likes the greed. And that means fourth down gambles. Now, maybe that evolves some. Maybe there has to be a little more complementary football as you go forward. You have to win games in different ways, and I think that's going to be part of Ryan's evolution as a coach. But yes, at his core, in his heart, he wants to score 60.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that because it's fun to watch.
Yeah, the other team's got to score 61 to beat you.
They have the tools to score 60.
Yeah, and last two things. Jim Knowles, I mean, what is your take? Was the Ohio State defense close to getting it right last year, but then just big plays killed them? Or do you have your eye on that aspect of the Ohio State team this year?
I think it'd be interesting to see if Jim Knowles sort of with a full off-season purview to really fit the portal and fit the system, and then guys growing up in the system. I think college football is so in flux, Tim, that people underestimate the value of continuity and how you can grow with a year in a scheme.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the production for Jim Knowles is the production when you look at his career. And if you take out the Michigan game, I would say they had a very successful defense last year. But they can't have gashes like they did. They can't have guys running free like they did. And I think that becomes Jim Knowles versus Michigan's offense ultimately becomes the biggest matchup of Ohio State season.
And there you go. That's what I want to end with. Two straight losses to Michigan. Kind of embarrassing losses, really, the way they went down in the second half of both of those games. How much of this is a referendum game for this upcoming season?
I think it's always
for Ryan Day and Ohio
State. It's always a referendum game for Ohio State, and I think it will be big. The stakes were really high last year, and they're only ratcheted up this year. So it's a huge game. It typically determines a trip to Indianapolis, to this very field. It typically determines a spot in the playoff. Although the Buckeyes managed to get in last year. So again, I don't think you can ever underestimate the stakes of the game.
Can I ask one last thing? Because that's what I always do. 2024, the Big Ten has no divisions anymore. Ohio State, Michigan could play two weeks in a row. You know, you heard Ryan talk about that. I've been talking about that forever on my show. Like, you really want to see that maybe even 3 times in a row with the new playoffs format? It could happen.
Yeah.
Just when you think something can't happen, it happens. Or
Carolina Duke play in the Final Four?
Yes. So what is your take on the Big Ten in this direction in that regard?
Look, the Big Ten and the SEC are pulling away from everyone else. And all the sort of short-term hiccups or quirks in the matrix, like a potential back-to-back Ohio State-Michigan game, are a price of doing business. And they're doing good business at the Big Ten. They're doing very big business. You heard all the TV partners that Commissioner Petiti thanked yesterday. The business is fine, and sometimes there's on-field inconveniences to businesses growing.
Always enjoy talking with Pete Thamel. Just this time I recorded it. And by the way, it is Thamel, man. His name gets pronounced a lot of different ways, but once again, I double-checked with him before we started. It is Pete Thamel. He's a native of Massachusetts, but boy, as he spread his wings, I mean, rising through the ranks from the newspaper in Syracuse to the New York Times to Sports Illustrated to Yahoo Sports, and then finally ending up with ESPN and becoming their senior college football writer and their insider for College Game Day. And Pete Thamel, appreciate you once again for joining the Tim May podcast, just the Tim May show. I'm telling you, folks, I probably ought to put a $10 bill in the bucket every time I say the Tim May podcast. That'll be, remember I had that bucket a long time ago because I said so much, but that was costing me a ton of money. Maybe I can control myself about this latest thing. We'll see where that goes. Of course, I'd give all the money to charity, probably to the Ryan and Nina and Ryan Day Fund. But that's another story for another day. But I appreciate G. Scott Sr. joining the Tim May podcast. There you go. There's $10 right in there right away. Did that on purpose. Not. Who knows, right? But joining the Tim May show once again. And maybe by this time next week, we'll be talking about an Ohio State starting quarterback. That's easy for me to say, but will it be easy for Ryan Day to say? We'll see between now and then. But until then, this is Tim May. We'll see you then.